Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're beginning now the Rambam for Friday, the 4th of September, chapter 9 of the laws of Teshuvah. Before we begin, any questions on what we've learned thus far in the summary? Oh, good. Okay. So, let's just pull up the Rambam here. In case you don't have it in front of you. Okay, so chapter 9 of the laws of Teshuvah, it's the second to last chapter. Tomorrow night we're going to be making a siyum, a conclusion on the entirety of the first book of Rambam, the first of the 14 books. We're towards the end of the laws of Hilchos Teshuvah. And the question that Rambam addresses now is, what do we do about all the issues of reward and punishment? Meaning, in the previous chapter, the Rambam said that everything that's going to happen in the reward, so to speak, for all of the mitzvot is what? Is olam haba, okay, the world to come. Now, what's important to remember is that the olam haba can mean different things. In the context of what the Rambam was referring to yesterday, olam haba refers to the afterlife that we currently experience, as he's going to explain somewhat today and more tomorrow. That today, when a soul ends its life in this world, it then continues into the next world. The world that is coming after the world that we are in now. However, there's another way of understanding the term olam haba, and that is the world to come after this world, meaning when we complete the service of Hashem, the worship of God in life as we know it now, we will then merit, as we'll read at the end of today's chapter, the era of Mashiach. Okay? But the question that we address now is, what about all of the promises in Torah? Torah tells us that if a person is careful with a mitzvah, they get a reward for it. And we were told about different particular mitzvot. If you fulfill this, then you'll merit. You'll merit long life. You'll merit to live in the land of Israel. And we see it. We see people that take on mitzvot, and thank God are able to through that experience great blessings. So the question is, why then don't we talk about that? Meaning, why is the Rambam pushing everything off? Why are we pushing everything off for the afterlife? What about the here and now? Which one? So let's take a look into how the Rambam will reconcile that question. The question arises, as explained, the reward for the mitzvahs and the good which we will merit if we observe the path of Hashem as described by the Torah is the world to come. As it says, so that good will be granted you and you will live long. And particularly in these few weeks, Parshas Kiseitze, Parshas Kisavei, we learn this at length, the blessings and the curses that come to a person in this world. Also the retribution which is exacted from the wicked who abandon the paths of the righteous. He's cut off, the soul shall surely be cut off. His sin shall remain upon him. If that's the case, what is meant in the statements made throughout the Torah at the beginning of Parshas B'chukaysai? If you observe the Torah's laws, you will acquire. I will give you your rain in its right time, etc. And if you do not observe the Torah's laws, such and such will happen to you. Meaning, there is an abundance of literature in Torah that seems to imply that all of the benefits and difficulties that are promised are matters of this material world. For example, plenty, right? You'll have food, plenty and famine, war and peace, sovereignty over other nations or a humble national standing, the settlement of the land or exile, success in one's deed or loss, and all the other points mentioned in the covenant. Is it all for the next world, or are we going to get promised the mitzvahs here in this world? Now, it's important to remember that in tomorrow's Rambam, as you learn tomorrow night, the ultimate ideal is serving Hashem for no interest in reward, just out of love for Hashem, which we'll talk about soon. No agendas. What does it mean to serve Hashem with no agendas? But firstly, as we'll learn tomorrow, that's what you teach only to students of a very elevated stature. We all know the great conflict that arose in the Jewish people through the breakaway movements led by the Sadducees. Right? Where did the Sadducees get their name from? From the scholar, the Tzedukim were the followers of Tzadok. Sadok is where the name Sadducee comes from. He was a student of Antignos Ish Seichai, who taught him serve God without any interest in reward. And he thought that meant that Hashem won't give the reward. He says, if Hashem is not giving any reward, I'm out of here. And he started a whole breakaway movement. So clearly reward is very important. In resolution, the Rambam therefore says, it must be stated, all of these things are true. The yiyu, and they will be true. They have been realized in the past and they will be realized in the future. That when we fulfill all the mitzvahs in the Torah, we will acquire all the benefits of this world. Conversely, when we transgress them, the evils written in the Torah will occur. Okay? So this here, the Rambam is making a very clear statement that all promises of Torah will occur. It's important to remember that few people contributed more to the study of Torah and the observance of mitzvahs in all of history. Few people can have made as singular a contribution to that exercise like the Rambam himself. What it says on his grave, Mimoshe ad Moshe, they come to Moshe, that from Moses to Moses, no one arose like Moses, is quite literal. It's true. He had an outsized impact on the entire Jewish world. He made Torah accessible to the common man, to me and you, like almost no one else. The only one who could come close to that is maybe Rashi, and in a way even more than Rashi. And yet, for all of that immense contribution, he suffered throughout his entire life. You think you have tzaddis? You know, I once got a birthday card from somebody. You think you have tzaddis? I know a moihel that did a job with a milchik knife. All right? So, we think we have tzaddis. Look at the Rambam's life. The man suffered throughout, losing family close to him, his father, his brother that supported him, being chased by the Mongolians here, there, from Spain to Morocco to Egypt. He suffered terribly. And yet he is writing that these words are literal and true. And he doesn't address that question. I should point out, he doesn't address that question directly here. How to reconcile that element, but he does establish it, and I think it's fair to say that he has the credentials with which to say it. He's not speaking from a point of comfort and luxury and saying, "Don't worry, it's all easy." So we do still need to understand it, but he is making it clear. And yeah, okay. We can get further into that soon. Nevertheless, he says, those benefits are not the ultimate reward for the mitzvahs, nor are those evils the ultimate retribution to be exacted from someone who transgresses all the mitzvahs. It's not the end. Rather, the resolution of the matter is as follows. Hashem gave us this Torah, which is a tree of life. Whoever fulfills what is written within it and comprehends it with complete and proper knowledge will merit the life of the world to come. A person merits a portion of the world to come according to the magnitude of his deed and the extent of his knowledge. In addition, we are promised by the Torah, that if we fulfill it with joy and good spirit and meditate on its wisdom at all times, Hashem will remove all the obstacles which prevent us from fulfilling it. For example, sickness, war, famine, and the like. Similarly, he will grant us all the good which will reinforce our performance of the Torah, such as plenty, peace, and abundance of silver and gold, in order that we not be involved throughout all our days in matters required by the body, but rather will sit unburdened and thus have the opportunity to study the wisdom and perform mitzvahs in order that we merit the life of the world to come. So what the Rambam is saying in essence is that we need to be clear that yes, the ultimate reward is in the next world, but now we are already getting the benefits. Why are we getting benefit now if the reward is in the world to come? So there's different explanations on this Rambam. There's in fact a lot of commentary around this particular halacha, because he's delving into a very philosophical issue. And philosophically speaking, what is this reward that we are expecting? Are we getting it as day laborers? We're getting paid now, that Hashem has to pay us now? Or is it that we're, even if Hashem is not paying us, because he can't be paying us because the reward is coming later. So what could it be? My answer might be, if you remember, we learned in last week's Parsha, the mitzvah that when someone is working for me, I have to allow them to eat from the food that they're working with, right? If they're picking from the trees, they have to be allowed to eat from the fruit that they're picking. But the Rebbe actually gives an interesting explanation on the Rambam. He says that, you know what it's referring to? It's referring to a partnership. This world that we're working with now with Hashem, we are working in partnership. And when do the partners divide up the profits? If your partner's in a business, when do you divide up the profits? Every day? No. At the end. Either when you sell the business or when the business has completed its purpose, or at the end of the year when you're taking dividends. What are we getting now? If one of the partners is working in the business, they get paid also for that time. So the real value in the business, right? So if you have two partners and one of them is working, He'll take a salary. But is his salary why his heart is in the business? No, because there's plenty of other employees. Why is he caring so much? He cares much because it's his thing. And so that the reward that we're getting now in this world, it's like the salary just to be able to live on a day-to-day basis. But extracting the true value of the business, that's Yemais HaMashiach. That's the world to come. This principle is expressed by the Torah, that after we learn in Parshas V'eschana that Hashem promises all the benefits of the world, we are told, and charity will remain for us if we take care to perform all these mitzvahs. Meaning that Hashem makes sure that we're able to do our job properly. Similarly, the Torah has informed us that if we consciously abandon the Torah and involve ourselves in the vanities of the time in a manner similar to that stated in Parshas Hazinu, by Yishman, Yeshurun, by Yivat, that Yeshurun, which is a reference to the Jewish people, became fat and rebelled, then the true judge will remove from all the benefits of this world, which will reinforce their rebellion, those who abandon the Torah. He will bring upon them all the evils which prevent them from acquiring a portion in the world to come, so that they will be destroyed in the wickedness. Meaning, if we indulge now, we lose it. This was implied by the Torah's statement in this week's Parsha, in fact, today's Chumash, in the Teichacha, because you did not serve Hashem, your Lord, with happiness. You will serve your enemies whom Hashem sends against you. All of the curses, right? Because you didn't worship Hashem. But if you look at the verse closely, it doesn't say only because you didn't serve Hashem. It's because you didn't serve Hashem with happiness. Now, that's not the Rambam's emphasis here, but it is important to remember that if we don't find the joy in Hashem, in serving Hashem, it's not sustainable. It's not going to last. As it's told, I think, in the name of Reb Moshe Feinstein, the great, probably the preeminent halachic authority in America of the 20th century, who was once, I've heard it saying from many others, but who once said that the challenge of American Jews is that they're telling their children, Ois is shver zu sein a Yid. Instead of Eis is good to sein a Yid. They're telling their kids it's hard, it's difficult to be a Jew, instead of it's good, it's joyous. Because if you don't serve Hashem with joy, it's going to fall apart. Thus, the Rambam now gives a conclusion. These blessings and curses can be interpreted as follows. If you serve Hashem with happiness and observe His way, He will grant you these blessings and remove these curses from you, in order that you may be free to gain wisdom from the Torah and involve yourselves in it, so that you will merit the life of the world to come. What does that mean? Good will be granted you in the world that is entirely good, and you will live long in the world which is endlessly long, the world to come. Thus you will merit two worlds, a good life in this world, which in turn will bring you the life of the world to come. For if a person will not acquire wisdom in this world, and he does not possess good deeds, with what will he merit a portion in the world to come? Thus, Ecclesiastes, the Koheles tells us there is no work, no accounting, no knowledge, and no wisdom in the grave. Or as the Sodicans in America say, no deposit, no return. So what the Rambam is telling us is essentially that the mitzvahs of Torah, as we know them, are all very, very much for the here and now. But that's not the ultimate. It's not the ultimate, there's something more to it. And then he concludes this halacha with the reverse. Conversely, if you have abandoned Hashem and become obsessed with food, drink, lewdness, and the like, He will bring all these curses upon you and remove all blessing until you will conclude all your days in confusion and fear. You will not have a free heart or a complete body to fulfill the mitzvahs in order that you forfeit the life of the world to come. Thus, you will forfeit two worlds. For when a person is occupied in this world with sickness, war, and hunger, he cannot involve himself with either wisdom or mitzvahs, which allow him to merit the life of the world to come. Any questions yet?
Many. Rabbi, it's easy.
Oh, you into questions. Sorry.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to understand and accept the rewards in the world to come, and I've got no problem with that concept. But it's very difficult to see the rewards and punishments being meted out in the world as we know it now, when you look around at events that have happened. The obvious one is the Holocaust, but there are many others where you don't see that promised reward or punishment being meted out. You're finding bad people being rewarded. This is the usual dilemma. And I don't see Rambam, in fact, answering that question.
Yeah, so I in my defense, I started off the chapter by saying that we were going to run into this question.
Friday, hey?
What's that?
I'm good, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm just going to mute everyone, and then you can unmute yourself if you have a question, just because I think we're getting a bit of noise. You can still unmute yourself. Sorry. Yeah. So the answer to the question, if I could say, again, it's not one that I can answer easily. But at the end of the day, you say, look at the Holocaust. I'll say different. Look at the sweep of Jewish history of 2,000 years of Galus. At the end of the day, the only consistent thread that runs through all 2,000 years is our connection to Torah and Mitzvah. No other nation has survived that level of persecution, of oppression, of suffering, which by any fair estimation should have spelled its end. So if you want to look collectively or generally, then I think I'll still hold mine. I'm still with the Rambam. Question is personal. What about in my personal life? And for that, at the end of the day, every one of us has to look in the mirror and say, am I not blessed? And oftentimes, the blessing that we want is we want all of the blessings at once today, and to say as if we deserve all of it. Meaning, I cannot speak about anyone else. No one. Not my wife, not my children, not my best friend. I can only speak for myself in this regard, and I can say that the blessings I have gotten have been vastly disproportionate in favor of my merits, ignoring my demerits. And I caught a letter from the Rebbe where a fellow wrote to him, complaining about things that he was going through. And he said, listen, at the end of the day, there were people who woke up in the concentration camps every single morning and started their day with Meida Ani Lefanecha, thanking Hashem for a new day and saying the morning blessings. The morning blessings that we say, thanking Hashem for all of the basics of living. On the other extreme, there are people that are blessed with abundant wealth and health and everything they need, and choose to find small things to complain about. And most of us are in the middle of those two extremes. We're not suffering, Baruch Hashem, like those who were in the concentration camps. We're not blessed to be in the top 0.01% flying around the world on private jets. We're in the middle. And for us, it's a matter of choice. And these brachas that we see, we need to make the choice do we want to see them and accept them? But the suffering in the world, the reality is, if you ask your average person, is the world better off than where it was 40 years ago? They'll say no, much worse. The world. If you look at any metric, though, and study the data, the world is in a much better place than where it was 40 years ago. Okay? Other than happiness indexes that are done on Facebook posts. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. That said, your question is still a good question. And for that, we need to go to the next halacha. So please join me as we continue. I'm sorry, it's a bit late. And for these reasons, their prophets, all of Israel, their prophets and their sages have yearned for the Messianic age so that they can rest from the oppression of the Gentile kingdoms who do not allow them to occupy themselves properly. Meaning, I think what the Rambam is saying here with this halacha is in some sense an answer to that question that you asked. In that, yes, ultimately, though, it's not all working out. And you're right. That's why we need a collective reward. They will find rest and increase the knowledge in order to merit the world to come. And just by the way, this halacha mirrors very much with some very profound and interesting differences that we're not going to get into now. But this halacha mirrors almost verbatim the last halacha of the entire Rambam. Here he writes, Ba'isel Hayamim, there it's Ba'isel Azman, knowledge, wisdom, and truth, Emes will be abundant, where it says, the earth will be full of the knowledge of God. One man, well, he actually changes the text of the pasuk here. Teach his brother, nor a man his colleague. I will take away the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh, meaning our hearts are stone-like now to Hashem. We have no natural sensitivity to God. But when Mashiach comes, we will have a natural sensitivity to the presence of Hashem. Why? Because the king who will arise from David's descendants will be a great master of knowledge, greater master of knowledge than Solomon. A great prophet close to the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. Therefore, we teach the entire nation and instruct them in the path of God. All the nations will come to hear him. As Isaiah states, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountains of God's house shall be established at the peak of the mountains, Beresh HaHarim, and all the nations shall flow to it. Meaning, we are going to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, not by blowing up Al-Aqsa, but the entire world of all nations, rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash and celebrating a house of Hashem there. Nevertheless, the ultimate of all reward and the final good, which will have no end of decrease, is the life of the world to come. In contrast, the Messianic age will be life within the context of this world, with the world following its natural pattern, except that sovereignty will return to Israel, meaning we will be ruled then by the nation. What is the ultimate of both? That's the era of Tchias HaMeisim, which the Rambam doesn't refer to here. In the 13 principles of faith, principle number 13 is faith in Mashiach. Principle number 12, is Ani Ma'amin B'Emunah Shlem B'Viat HaMashiach, and I believe in the coming of Mashiach, which he's referring to here. But principle number 13 is belief in the resurrection of the dead. And that's the eternal world, which he discusses elsewhere, not in Mishnah Torah. The sages of the previous generations have already declared there is no difference. The emancipation from a subjugation to the Gentile kingdoms. With that, we conclude chapter 9. Any further questions?
Rabbi, do you have time? Do you have time for a question?
Yeah, sure, of course.
When we daven every morning,
It's 1:30, so we've concluded the Rambam. If anybody has to go, you're welcome to go. But if you want to stick around for the questions, please feel free.
When we daven every morning, Elu Devarim,
Yeah.
these are the precepts. So it gives in the notes two sources. It gives from Talmud, Peah and
Yeah.
Shabbos.
Yeah.
It gives, and so would Rambam be drawing his commentary from those sources?
Yeah, he actually
Uh,
takes
uh,
some of the wording from there. He talks about a keren kayemas le'ilam haba, that the principle is in the world to come and the dividends are now, the fruits of that are now,
Yes.
is quoting from there. Yeah.
So
Fair enough.
the other question then is in the beginning it's fixed measure. There's no fixed measure, and then but it doesn't say there are any fruits to enjoy from those. It only goes on there are fruits from then it goes on to list the precepts for which there are fruits to
Right.
be enjoyed. Some in this world, and so why not in those precepts and not the first
What's
ones?
interesting to remember is that there the Rambam is talking about the mitzvahs between man and man.
Ah, okay.
And in the mitzvahs between man and man, the benefits in this world are much more and much quicker.
Right.
In the world to come, in mitzvahs between man and God,
What do you mean?
where the
Well, it speaks about deeds of kindness in the first lot of precepts. And then in the second idea of the precepts, it talks about between man and man, mostly.
yeah. So there is questions that are raised in terms of does the Rambam subscribe to everything that's in this Mishnah? There's a machlekes in the Sechta Chulin. You may have referenced it yesterday about the whole idea of reward in this world, and there is an opinion that schar mitzvahs b'hayal maleka, that mitzvahs between man and God, there is no reward for it in this world. It's all in the next world. Anything that happens otherwise, but it's not direct. It's a philosophical question because of the mitzvah that we learn about Shiluach HaKan, about sending away the mother bird. Did you note that yesterday?
I couldn't.
That happened when the guy fell off the ladder.
I couldn't be on yesterday.
There we have a sort of a glaring example of somebody who fulfilled the mitzvah and was punished right away. And sort of taking Kent's question to the nth degree, like in the moment. And there are those that therefore say, okay, so there is no reward in this mitzvah. Whatever happens in this world is a pattern of life, obviously by divine providence, but it's not in terms of reward for the mitzvahs. But Rambam doesn't agree with that position. That Rambam writes very strongly in this chapter that there is reward for the mitzvahs. Does that answer your question somewhat? Not so much.
No, I'm just wondering. Well, it does. It does. Between man and God, I would. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
John, Stephen, Jeff, Dennis, Andrew, Shmuley, Jackie.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbat shalom.
Very much.
Shabbos,
Shalom.
everybody.
Tomorrow night.
Shalom.
Hello, Tov.